Mike, are there two species, a Californian and Indian?
Yes, just like a robin and a blue jay, they're two entirely different species. The California condor has white underneath the wing. It weighs about 20 pounds. The Andean condor has white on the outside of the wing and goes up to 33 pounds. So they're very different birds.
Now, how has the Indian condor helped you with this program? I mean, what's that bird done to help?
Well, this bird should be proud of its role in this program. We're lucky to have a surrogate species that we can test out all of the techniques and methods that we're now using on the California condor. Everything has been developed first on the Andean condor. The transmitters that are placed on the California condors that are now flying in the Los Padres National Forest were first developed on these birds in South America. We raise these birds in captivity using the puppets to help them imprint on the image of their own species. It's very important. All of this technique has been developed first with Andean condors. Hey, good morning.
Morning.
This looks like the satellite center.
This is where we keep track of mostly everything they do in the compound behind us. We can zoom right in on some of the birds' activities right up close.
Gee.
So we can watch what they're doing in the pens, as well as what they might do in the breeding chambers and things like that. And we videotape what's happening. And
this is where all the courtship takes place out here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you know that a condor's going to get ready to breed every 2 years?
Well, they go through a very distinctive courtship pattern. What happens is courtship begins with the male displaying to the female. And it's actually a very beautiful display. The male, when he approaches her, spreads his wings very wide and cups them just a bit so that there's a tight arch. And it looks like every muscle is tight. And then he bends his head down, facing his beak to the ground, and then will rock as he approaches the female and finally circle her doing this courtship. As the season progresses and the female warms up, you'll see a lot of allopreening where each bird preens the other bird, wrapping their necks together. And this finally culminates in copulation, usually beginning in December or January.
Do they mate for life?
Yeah, condors, when they finally do pair up at an older age, they will pair for their entire life. It is worth noting, though, that if they lose a mate, they very quickly will take a new mate. But as long as they're around, they stay paired for life. The bird, genetically, I believe, is more secure now than it's been in recent times. The real battle, though, isn't in the zoos. This has been the easy part. The trick is that we're trying to get one of these birds reintroduced back into a Southern California environment. It's a congested habitat. There are lots of problems out there. So even though we know not all the problems are solved, the most important thing we can do for this bird is to get it back out there.
With two stable captive populations in place, one at the Los Angeles Zoo and another in San Diego, the recovery team prepared to release two juvenile California condors back to the wild. They were tagged and fitted with radio transmitters, and in January 1992, Chicuyans and Gawi were set free. And in December 1992, 6 more condors were released to join the struggling population in the wild.
because these condors are released birds without the bottles of parents or a wild population out there to teach them how to be wary of man, have shown an inclination to be somewhat curious, too curious in fact. They're a social species, very gregarious. People have approached them close enough to take pictures, and this has been a problem for condors in the past that makes them an easy shot. There was one case already where we've had a bird shot at. And in this instance, there was an individual who was trying out a new 22 in an area that was restricted from having guns. And yet he shot at this large, dark bird, as he said, and he's been apprehended.
The biggest threat is accidental things. Birds ingesting lead from a carcass that hunters shot. Man's debris, essentially. And basically the message, I think, is that we have to be careful about how we utilize habitat. This is a bird that's not very afraid of people, and that you can share the habitat with. People can camp, have a pleasant time out there, but take your trash with you.
Chicuyans, the male California condor that were released, died in October of ethylene glycol poisoning. It's a substance often used in antifreeze. sweet tasting, attractive to cats and dogs, and apparently even condors. And it's just another case of how we're interacting adversely with animals in the wild.
Following this interview, yet another California condor died. The bird died on impact with a power line in the Los Padres National Forest.
It only brings up the importance of our program here at the zoo and that of Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game to educate the public as to how these birds are going to be in the wild and how to behave around them, as well as the importance of conserving wildlife in general. Through this whole program, we're learning as much as we can about how to release birds back to the wild. For the California condor to be preserved in the future, it needs a food source. And rather than continually putting out food for these animals, it would be nice to think that various species that these animals feed on would be around in a naturalistic type environment, so you'd have a whole ecosystem that's preserved instead of just a single species, which is definitely more time consuming and costly. One of the most important lessons we've learned from the California condor experience is that you don't wait until there are only 27 birds left in the world before you start a conservation effort.
The folks now have a bird that they're proud of, that they're a part of history being made, and they want to see this bird make it.
Man has held a long-lasting fascination with the power and freedom of flight, and Mike Wallace, who has spent his life studying birds, is no exception. I accompanied Mike on the ground to his latest passion, flying through the air in the company of his feathered friends. It's a long way to go up just to fly. Don't you get scared getting this high up?
No, it's not so bad. You get used to it after a while.
How high up is it?
It's about 3,300 feet.
3,300 feet.
Yeah.
Doesn't this kind of scare you, be up here and knowing you got to fly out over those mountains?
Well, it's like anything else, you get used to it. Driving in LA traffic is a pretty scary prospect, but, we end up doing it every day. We sort of adjust to it.
And just because you study birds, you just had to fly like a bird?
We're releasing birds in the mountains here in the Los Padres National Forest about 3 years ago. And the condors had flown over, and we're flying with some of the hang glider pilots. And I said, boy, that's something I've got to do. Within a few weeks, I was learning how to hang glide, and it didn't take me too long to be up there in the same thermals that the birds were using.
Do you think that you yourself have learned more about how birds fly by doing this?
Definitely. That was one of the exciting parts, is that after 15 years of watching these birds and to get out there and find out not only what it's like, but the kind of decisions they make is it's incredible. Condors, like large vultures and soaring birds, rely on the wind and not flapping or powered flight to stay in the air. So what they seek out is rising air in the environment. So as it heats up today, there'll be pockets of darker terrain that'll heat up the air around it, and that air will start to rise. Cooler air around it will drop. And these birds, just through very sensitive feelings, find out where that rising air is and stay out of the sinking air. That's exactly what hang gliders and sailplanes do. And then that's the real trick, is to circle on this bubble of rising air. A particularly interesting benefit of taking up hang gliding is that all of a sudden I can see how they're planning their flight and how they're getting from one point to another. Since it's so important for a condor to be able to find this rising air to conserve energy, they seek out these spots. And that's what hang glider pilots have to do. When they fly along a chain of cliffs, it's because the air, or the wind, is coming from a certain direction. When that wind changes, it may be a different chain of cliffs that they have to use on that day.
You're talking condor type flying, because they're gliders.
Right.
So a wren or a woodpecker might not fly like this.
Entirely different. No.
See, that's why I think I'm a woodpecker, because I wouldn't glide.
It's like the powered flight.
I flap my wings like a peregrine falcon.
Right.
So I think what we'll do, we'll wait and do a peregrine falcon, and you go ahead and do the condor flight. Got to be in shape to hang glide, huh?
Well, it helps.
You're talking to men in shape. Someday, I might give hang gliding a try. But for now, I was quite happy to be on solid ground, watching Mike and his instructor prepare for takeoff.
Ready to go?
There we go.
Hey, Jack.
Be good.
All right.
Y'all be careful.
1, 2, 3, and walk. Pick up feet.
Yeah.
Hang gliding is a great opportunity to get up there with the birds and find out what it's like to exist at that altitude. And it really has given me an opportunity to understand how they get from one place to another. So as we're trying to establish these birds in the wild, it gives me a little bit more insight as to what they're up against.
Good. Free as a bird. Look at that. Wow. Maybe I'll do that sometimes. Just not today. Cool. Wow. It's gotta be fun.
To be up there in the clouds with the birds is just wonderful. It's like a childhood dream come true. We've all thought about being able to spread your wings and fly and get up there and enjoy it like the rest of the animals.
Next time us birds with a feather will stick together. Yeah, well, you keep on us. Can we do 3 next time? Well, we're gonna get you up there now that you've seen it happen. Just like the condors. That was it. Great flight. For centuries, mankind has been fascinated by birds' gift of flight and has dreamed of flying himself. Many times we cause harm to animals that we greatly admire, and much of this harm is caused by our innocent acts. We must begin to open our eyes to see these damaging results. We want to continue to see these magnificent creatures grace our skies.